I wouldn't believe the story if someone else were telling it, but it's true. It started when I went to college. It was the first day of school. All these people are coming up to me saying, Eddie,
It is
how are
believed
you?
that there are 7 people who look like you in this world. Not necessarily related to you though. If any of you watching this has ever got a twin, you would understand what the bond is like. This story is rather bizarre. This starts like a story with a happy ending, but there are a lot of twists along the way. The story starts with Bobby, aka Robert, entering the New York Community College and starts getting greeted by everybody on the campus like they already know him. He's quite sure he doesn't know any one of them. Quite confused, he checks into the dorm and then realizes he was mistook to be someone called as Eddie, aka Edward, as everyone greeted him as Eddie. One of the guys who was sure that this couldn't be Eddie was in a state of shock because Bobby exactly looked like Eddie, walked like Eddie, spoke like Eddie, and he had a smirk like Eddie. Eddie was raised in Long Island. Now this guy, confused beyond imagination, made Bob call Eddie. Bobby gets a hang of the telephone nearby and calls Eddie up. Bobby says, "Hi Eddie." Eddie responds, "Yes." Bobby says, "I'm meeting all these people who say I'm you." Eddie says, "I've been getting some calls too." After talking for a while, Bobby asks Eddie about his date of birth and if he was adopted. And he was nervous about what he was going to hear. And there came an answer where Eddie responded saying yes. When asked about the agency that he was adopted from, Eddie checks with his mom, gives Bob the answer, which was Louis Weiss Agency. Bob is shocked beyond imagination at this point because he was adopted from Louis Weiss Agency as well. So Bobby, along with Eddie's friend, drives all the way to Long Island, goes to Eddie's home, knocks the door, and he's totally confused about what he's looking at because Eddie was exactly like Bobby. There was no doubt that these guys were twins, and when one of the guys moved, the other guys would move as well. Sounds amazing, doesn't it? When the press covered this article, there was another amazing twist. There was a guy who was reading this article. He was David, and he was born on the same day as well. And guess what? He was adopted from the same agency too. Above all, he looked exactly the same. What? He thought to himself. They are triplets, and he wastes no time in reuniting with the long-lost brothers. What followed was an insane, intense reunion of the brothers, lots of love and unlimited fun. They were having a blast.
You guys have been on the front page of every newspaper in the world.
True. They were more like clones than they were like brothers.
It was a miracle.
There was nothing that could keep us apart.
They garnered all the attention, rightfully so, from the press, TV, primetime shows, cameo roles in movies, interviews, etc. Though separated for 19 years, they were very, very similar. They smoked the same brand of cigarettes, they walked the same way, they spoke alike, they liked the same color. Also, their taste in women was also similar. They went on to begin a restaurant by the name Triplets, which had gained a lot of attention and had people coming from all across the country just to see them. They were on a roll, so was the business. Little did they know there was a storm coming. In the mid-90s, a journalist called Lawrence Wright was working on a story for the New Yorker magazine about a few identical twins. This was not a normal story, mind you. As a part of this research, he came across this study where identical twins were separated at birth. He thought, who would do that? And why? It was cruel after all. Strange enough that these babies came from the same adoption agency. Guess which one? Louis Weiss Services. It left the triplets in a state of shock. After all, they realized they were split as a part of an experiment to be studied as lab rats, and they couldn't live with that. When they connected back the dots, each one of them had a faint memory of someone who would visit them frequently when they were kids, claiming to be from the agency to take some IQ tests and other tests for the welfare of the kid. The parents thought this was normal back then, but now they're all fuming with anger, and they have a reason for that. There was also anger and confusion among the adopted parents. Now it's evident that it was a part of the experiment led by a psychologist called Dr. Peter Neubauer. how cruel. Twins were separated at birth and were given to parents within 100-mile radius across different sections of the society. Someone would frequently come and check upon them, film them to understand how the twins adapted to the new conditions and how they behaved in different environments, and they call this study nature or nurture. Now this put the triplets in a state of confusion, shock, anger, disappointment and frustration, because it was a planned experiment where the twins were separated at birth and were given away to 3 separate families. One was a blue-collar family, one was a well-off family, and one was a reasonably well family, just to see how these kids would adapt in these conditions and whether the nature that they were born in was dominant or the way they were nurtured was dominant. This made no sense to any of them. Basically, Louis Wise agency would separate identical twins, not just the triplets, but there were at least 5 other cases where the twins were separated, while a team of scientists led by Neubauer would follow up and study them as subjects. The triplets couldn't fathom this. The triplets, quite angry, started seeking more info about the study. The more they tried, the more they failed. In the meantime, differences began to spring up between the triplets, and Edward took his own life, and it was concluded that he had mental issues. Strangely, the studies of this experiment never got published, and the material was all locked up in the archives of the Yale University. And the worst part of the story is this information cannot be accessed until 2066. What do you want to call this? Fate? What did the twins do to go through all this? Well, no one will ever know. Watch this story in detail in a documentary called 3 Identical Strangers on Netflix. That's it for this episode. I will sketch you soon with another episode. Until then, my name is Casey. Cheers, guys.